The first thing I remember is the unbearable cold. Not just the kind that chills your skin, but something deeper, a cold that seeped into my bones, into my very soul. Then there was nothing. Silence. Darkness, a vast emptiness stretching endlessly in all directions. And then, just as suddenly as I had left, I was pulled back. I gasped for air, my lungs burning as if I had been drowning. My body convulsed violently, the sterile lights of the hospital room blinding me as I blinked back into existence. A sharp, rhythmic beeping filled my ears, machines frantically measuring a heartbeat that just moments ago had ceased entirely. "He's back!" A nurse's voice pierced through the chaos, filled with disbelief. Doctors surrounded me, their faces frozen somewhere between awe and confusion. I could hear them speaking, rattling off medical jargon, but it all felt distant, like the echoes of another world. My mind wasn't just here. It was still tethered to the vision, to what I had seen beyond the veil of death. I wasn't the same. One of the doctors, a tall man with graying hair and an air of authority, leaned in cautiously. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. "Dr. Graves, you were clinically dead for 13 minutes. Do you remember anything?" I turned my head to face him, my throat raw and my muscles weak. How could I possibly explain what I had seen? How could I make them understand that death was not the end, that something far greater, far more terrifying awaited just beyond? I swallowed hard, then whispered the only truth that mattered. "You've been lied to. The truth beneath the ice is not what we think it is." The room fell into absolute silence. Some of the medical staff exchanged uneasy glances, while others simply dismissed my words as the ramblings of a man who had just returned from the brink of death. But not everyone. A young nurse, standing near the back of the room, took a hesitant step forward. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked almost like recognition. "Heard things," she murmured under her breath, "about Antarctica, about what they don't tell us." Before she could say more, the lead doctor shot her a sharp glance and she fell silent. But I saw the truth in her expression. She believed me. And in that moment, I knew why I had been sent back. The world needed to know. I had spent years buried in research, dedicating my life to uncovering the secrets hidden beneath Antarctica's frozen wasteland. My team and I had come to this desolate place under the guise of scientific exploration, mapping ice formations, analyzing climate history. But the deeper we dug, the more apparent it became that we were uncovering something we were never meant to find. The first anomaly appeared in our data months before the expedition even began. Strange heat signatures, patterns beneath the ice that defied all geological explanations. We thought it might be remnants of geothermal activity, perhaps an undiscovered volcanic system. But what we found was something far older, something that had been buried deliberately. Then came the transmissions. Weak, distorted signals, pulsing from beneath the ice. No known source, no logical explanation. At first we assumed it was an interference glitch, some kind of electromagnetic anomaly, but the signals weren't random. They followed a pattern, a language. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate. The deeper we drilled, the stranger things became. Our instruments malfunctioned without reason, seasoned researchers began reporting vivid nightmares, and the air itself seemed charged with an energy none of us could explain. But nothing could have prepared us for what we finally uncovered. Beneath the ice, buried under miles of frozen history, lay an impossible structure, a city of titanic proportions, stretching beyond the limits of our understanding. Its architecture defied physics, shifting and pulsating as though it were alive. The walls were inscribed with symbols unknown to any human civilization, yet they seemed eerily familiar, as if the knowledge had been buried within our subconscious all along. At the center of the city stood a throne, massive, ancient, waiting. But the one who was meant to sit upon it was not of this world. We weren't the only ones aware of this discovery. Before we could fully grasp what we had found, the site was taken from us. Military forces, intelligence agencies, and powerful figures we had never seen before arrived, shutting down all communication. We were escorted out, our research confiscated, our questions ignored. It became clear this wasn't just an archaeological find. This was a long-planned unveiling. The world's most powerful leaders, the wealthy, the influential, even some of the most respected spiritual figures, had been waiting for this moment. And as I watched them gather around that throne with reverence in their eyes, I realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't a discovery. This was a return. The moment the discovery was made public, the world changed. At first, the news was subtle, headlines hinting at breakthroughs in Antarctic research, whispers of an ancient civilization buried beneath the ice. Scientists and government officials gave carefully worded statements, revealing just enough to spark curiosity but never the full truth. Then the announcements became bolder. News anchors, historians, and even religious leaders began speaking in unison. This is the greatest revelation of our time. It was a slow, deliberate conditioning. The world was being prepared for something monumental, something that would shake the very foundation of human history. Television screens and online platforms flooded with documentaries and expert panels discussing the significance of the ruins. The message was clear. Humanity was never alone. We were not the first intelligent beings to walk this earth. These ancient architects, the true builders of civilization, had returned. But it wasn't just history they wanted to rewrite. The deception ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. Soon, world leaders stood together in televised addresses, speaking of a new dawn, a new era of enlightenment. We are on the precipice of a great awakening, they proclaimed. A chance to evolve beyond our limitations, to unite under a higher understanding. Scientists confirmed it, historians validated it, even religious figures began reinterpreting sacred texts, subtly shifting their meanings to fit the narrative. The idea spread like wildfire. The ancient beings beneath the ice were not just visitors, they were our creators. The world was enthralled. People celebrated in the streets, rejoicing at the thought of reconnecting with these advanced entities. Governments promised technological wonders, disease eradication, limitless energy, even the potential for immortality itself. The offer was irresistible, the promise of paradise on earth. But at what cost? Jesus had warned me of this moment. His words echoed in my mind. They will not make them choose between good and evil. They will convince them that evil is good. I saw churches divided, their leaders torn between faith and progress. Some warned against the deception, desperately trying to hold on to the truth. But others, many others, embraced it, preaching that this was the fulfillment of prophecy, the next step in divine evolution. The world's greatest lie had begun. And the worst part, the people wanted to believe it. The world stood at the precipice of transformation. What had begun as an archaeological marvel had now evolved into something far greater, an invitation. The ancient beings, whom the world had come to revere as humanity's lost benefactors, were ready to share their gifts. These were not just relics of the past, nor distant watchers. They were here to guide us into a new era, they claimed, to elevate us beyond our limitations. The announcement sent shockwaves across the globe. Governments backed by top scientists and spiritual leaders declared that humanity was on the verge of evolution. A technology unlike anything before had been uncovered beneath the ice, a biological and mechanical integration that could enhance the human experience. They called it the upgrade, a fusion of mind and machine, spirit and science. No more disease, no more aging, no more weakness. Those who accepted it would gain heightened intelligence, enhanced physical abilities, and even an extended lifespan. It wasn't a command. It wasn't forced. It was a choice. And yet, I could see the trap hidden beneath the promise. Jesus had shown me this moment, the moment when people would willingly surrender their own souls in exchange for power. They would not be coerced. They would not be threatened. They would want it. The deception was complete. One by one, nations lined up to embrace the gift. The upgrade was presented as the natural next step in human progress, the bridge between mortality and divinity. The media glorified those who accepted it, celebrities, political figures, and even religious leaders who endorsed it as a divine blessing. Churches split apart. Some preached that this was not the mark of darkness, but rather the fulfillment of destiny. Others, those who resisted, were cast aside as extremists, as fearmongers who stood in the way of enlightenment. The choice was being made, and most of the world was rushing forward without hesitation. But what they could not see, what they refused to see, was the cost. As each person received the upgrade, something in them changed. Their connection to something deeper, something eternal, began to fade. Their prayers felt hollow, their sense of conviction dulled. They still spoke, still walked, still lived their lives, but their souls had been altered in a way that could never be undone. I watched in horror. This was not just a technological breakthrough, it was a severance. Jesus had warned me. They will tell them it is a gift, but it is a curse. Once they accept it, they will no longer be able to hear me. And then I saw what came next. The upgrade was only the beginning. The world had made its choice. The upgrade was no longer just an option, it had become the standard. Governments issued statements declaring that those who refused would be left behind, unable to partake in the new world. They did not force it, at least not yet. But the pressure was mounting. Employers began requiring it. Banks hinted at new systems that would only be accessible to those who had integrated. Healthcare, education, and even simple daily transactions were becoming impossible without it. The resistance began as a whisper. Small groups of people scattered across the world saw the truth for what it was. They refused to take the upgrade, choosing instead to live outside the system. They were doctors, engineers, scientists, and ordinary citizens who had once believed in progress until they saw what lay beneath the surface. They gathered in hidden places, sharing information, warning others. They were hunted, branded as rebels, as fanatics, as obstacles to humanity's future. But the real battle was not fought in the streets. It was a battle of the soul. I knew my role in all of this. I had been sent back to warn them, to tell them the truth before it was too late. But how could I? Every institution, every media outlet, every authority had been aligned to silence voices like mine. The moment I spoke out, I would be discredited, labeled a liar, a conspiracy theorist, a religious extremist. Still, I could not stay silent. I used every method available. I spoke to those willing to listen. I sent out messages in the dark corners of the internet. I contacted journalists who had not yet sold their integrity. Some believed, many did not. But I wasn't alone. More and more people began to feel that something was wrong, that what was being offered was not salvation, but slavery. And then the first disappearances began. Whistleblowers. Scientists who had once been at the heart of the Antarctic project, but had started to ask too many questions. They vanished overnight, erased from records, their families too afraid to speak. Some who resisted the upgrade were found dead under mysterious circumstances. Others were imprisoned, accused of spreading dangerous misinformation. I realized then that the window was closing. Soon, they wouldn't just encourage the upgrade, they would demand it. And after that, they would enforce it. But Jesus had prepared me for this. He had told me that the deception would be so great that even the faithful would struggle to resist. I clung to those words, knowing that this was not just a test of knowledge, it was a test of faith. The time was coming when everyone would have to choose, not just between taking the upgrade or refusing it, but between truth and illusion, between surrendering to the system or standing firm, no matter the cost. I could only hope that enough people had listened before it was too late. The moment the world had been prepared for had finally arrived. After months, years of carefully orchestrated leaks, staged discoveries, and psychological conditioning, the grand revelation was set to unfold before the eyes of billions. Governments, scientific organizations, and media outlets had worked in unison, ensuring that when the truth was finally disclosed, the masses would not just accept it, but embrace it. A global broadcast was scheduled, one unlike anything the world had seen before. Leaders from every nation stood together, their expressions solemn, yet filled with barely concealed anticipation. They spoke of a new era, a turning point in human history. The ruins beneath the Antarctic ice, they declared, held the answers to humanity's greatest questions. They unveiled the structures, monolithic, otherworldly, pulsing with an energy science could not fully explain. The footage showed what appeared to be intricate halls, vast chambers, and a central throne that defied all logic, shifting and shimmering as if alive. Then came the final revelation: the entities. They emerged from the shadows of ancient corridors, their forms both mesmerizing and terrifying. They were not like us, yet they bore a striking familiarity, an intentional design, a calculated resemblance. They spoke in tongues long forgotten but somehow understood by all. The world stood in collective awe as these beings, with voices that seemed to resonate in both the mind and the soul, declared their purpose. We have returned. They claimed to be our benefactors, our creators. They spoke of humanity's origins, not in the divine, not in the biblical, but in the stars. They told us that we had been an experiment, a guided evolution, shaped by their knowledge and power. And the world believed them. The people rejoiced. Religious leaders, once cautious, now stepped forward, proclaiming that this was the enlightenment they had long awaited. Scientists, once skeptical, stood mesmerized, declaring that history must be rewritten. Governments pledged allegiance, eager to integrate the technologies these beings offered, technologies that would erase disease, extend life, and unite the world under a single, enlightened rule. But I knew the truth. This was not enlightenment. This was the deception. I watched as the final phase of the plan unfolded, the grand unveiling that had been in motion for generations. Jesus had warned me of this moment. He had shown me the consequences of believing the lie, yet here it was, playing out exactly as he had foretold. The world had been conditioned, prepared to accept these beings as gods. And soon, the ultimate choice would be presented, the final decision that would seal the fate of mankind. I felt a deep sorrow settle within me. There was no stopping what had begun. But there was still hope. For those who saw through the illusion, who recognized the deception, who remembered the warning, there was still time to resist. As the world descended into blind acceptance of the so-called enlightenment, those of us who still saw the truth realized that our time was running out. The deception had reached its peak. The unveiling of the ancient beings had not just reshaped history, it had rewritten the very foundation of human belief, science, and purpose. The world had willingly handed over its free will, convinced that it was gaining something greater. But we knew better. In secret meetings, in encrypted messages, in hushed conversations behind closed doors, a resistance began to form. Scattered across nations, across faiths, across backgrounds, we were the ones who had not fallen under the spell. We were the ones who still clung to the truth that had been revealed to us before it was too late. At first, our voices were small, drowned out by the overwhelming flood of celebration and acceptance. The media silenced any dissent, labeling it as fear-mongering, conspiracy, or religious extremism. But we had seen what was coming, and we could not remain silent. I recorded my testimony in every form possible: written words, digital files, spoken messages, encoded broadcasts, knowing that soon, even speaking the truth would come with consequences. I reached out to others, those who had also encountered the deception firsthand: former government officials, whistleblowers, underground researchers, those who had stumbled upon the secret long before the world was ready to hear it. The resistance grew, but so did the opposition. With every warning we shared, the world pushed back harder. The so-called enlightened called us dangerous. The governments, now fully aligned with the beings, began implementing new restrictions, tightening control over information, silencing voices of doubt, rewriting laws in the name of unity and progress. Then came the final step, the choice. The gift was being offered to all, a biological, technological, and spiritual transformation that would elevate mankind to the next stage of evolution. A cure for disease, an extension of life, a connection to something greater than ourselves, or so they claimed. It was not forced, not demanded, it was desired. And that was the greatest deception of all. I watched as people lined up willingly, eager for the transformation, their eyes filled with hope and wonder, They were convinced they were stepping into a new future, a utopia beyond their wildest dreams. But Jesus had shown me the truth. This upgrade was not just physical, it was spiritual. It was the severing of the soul from its creator, the final act of submission to the lie. Those who accepted it would no longer feel the weight of conviction, the call of the Holy Spirit, the presence of God. They would still walk, breathe, speak, but they would no longer be the same. And so as the world stood at the edge of this irreversible moment, the resistance made its last stand. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with the truth. We whispered it in the shadows, we sent it through unseen channels, we risked everything to ensure that at least some would hear the warning before it was too late. Some listened, some turned away from the deception, their eyes finally opening to the manipulation that had been placed upon them. They chose to stand apart, to resist, to cling to their faith no matter the cost. But many did not. The world had been prepared for this for far too long. The conditioning had been too deep. The desire for progress, for enlightenment, for something greater had blinded them to the truth. I do not know what comes next. I do not know how much longer I have. But I know this. The deception has come, and only those with eyes to see and ears to hear will escape it. And so I write these final words not to save the world, it has already chosen its path, but to reach the few who still question, who still seek, who still feel the truth pulling at their souls. Stay awake. Stay prepared. Hold fast to what is real, for the final